And I'm happy to provide some advice to you in the hope that this helps you bring STEM to your students in a way, in a multidimensional way, really, right? Intertwining career connections with social emotional learning. So let's get started. Now, all of us, I know as educators, right, our goal is to prepare kids who are future and life ready. And while making that happen, we want them to feel good about their learning experience, right? We like that that happiness. We want to see at the end of the day getting some light bulbs going, right? Enough curiosity and motivation so that the children they continue learning and exploring the topic that we're teaching, right? Now, I remember during the very early days of STEM for Kids, I was teaching a 32-hour long civil engineering curriculum. And about midway, I had planned an engineering design project for the kids to make bridge out of newspapers. Sounds like a simple project, but almost all teams were struggling with this one. Now I was seeing them, I was sitting there seeing them roll these, imagine these long, long sheets of newspaper, and they were rolling it and getting it to the full length, rolling it lengthwise, and getting it to be very long pillar shaped rods, right? And seeing them do that, and they were trying to use these pillars that they roll to use as columns to support their bridge, and they had some other variants going on as well. But imagine that when you imagine a rolling a long sheet of newspaper and using that as a base, these things do not have as much strength and they do not provide the structural stability needed to keep those paper bridges standing. So I'm seeing them sometimes, as their bridge kept failing, they're trying to add more pillars. Again, the same thing, they're rolling the newspapers long. And the engineer in me is like, oh my God, I wish I could just say, staff kids do it this way, right? Just fold the paper multiple times, make it stronger, and then roll. Yes, you'd lose some height, but the challenge is not about creating the highest bridge. The challenge is to create a bridge that sustains, it keeps standing. But again, that's the engineering me. But then the coach in me was saying some amount of creative struggle is required. It's a good thing to stretch those mental muscles, right? To stretch their critical thinking. And as a coach, I was encouraging them. I was inspiring them to think about more creative ways. What are some other ways that they could transform their paper, the material that they had in their hand before they used in their design? But of course, something was still missing in my approach. And as the children were sweating it out, right, visibly flustered, some were frustrated because they're trying and trying and it's just not working. Some of them were feeling sad. One could easily sense that the energy level in that room was way down. And I was agonizing about whether they were even going to remember all the great learning, all the wonderful experiences we have had for the last several days, and everything that they'd enjoyed so far prior to this activity. And now that they're feeling so low with all these negative emotions and feelings about their failure and the recency bias, is it all that they're going to remember? And this is what they're going to tell their parents? And will they even come back for more? And I was anxious that in these moments of failure, some of these children, are they just going to quit? Now, my mind was racing to figure out the best way to turn around the situation so that the kids come out energized and with a sense of accomplishment, right? That's important, that they actually achieved something and without that negative feeling of failure. Now, how many times have you encountered situations like these, right? The ideas, they're trying ideas and they just don't seem to work. And here you have kids just in, frustration, anger, sadness, any of those feelings, right? How many times have you encountered these situations? Now, I'll tell you that this is very common, especially in STEM fields, because the STEM fields are littered. They're littered with failures, ideas collapsing, solutions which were well thought out, maybe well planned out, but when you implement them, they don't work. When I started my engineering career, I learned about the Murphy's Law. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Very simple, right? Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. And so, in my engineering life, we would actually proactively plan, think ahead and say, okay, let's assume that this problem happened. Okay, what's our plan A? What's our plan B, C, and so on and so forth. So, and as I talk with many other people in the STEM fields, I was talking with a scientist the other day. 90% of his experiments, he was saying, would be failures, right? So now, when we put children in these STEM fields and having them to work in these projects, and now having for them to have to start encountering these situations, right? What do we do? So if I go back to the newspaper bridge design project, not only did I help children get some sense of accomplishment, but also that they left so excited that they wanted to continue doing more of this course. What I did that day to turn around the situation, that was 10 years ago, now has been improvised many times over and has already been applied and implemented thousands of times in numerous classrooms by thousands of teachers around the world. And I'm going to share those practical strategies with you so you can implement them in your own classroom. Sounds good? All right, so let's get going. Now, you know that creation is the pinnacle of STEM. And so let's look at, our goal being, and I'm going to turn my video off so you can see the graphics here. All right. So our goal being, having these happy kids who are really energized about their experience learning STEM, doing STEM, and you see those light bulbs going. And you as an educator thinking about, how do you make that happen now, right? So how do you do that knowing that these creation engine design projects and there will be failures and all these obstacles that keep coming along the way. Now the strategies, actually there are five of them, and two of those strategies are things that you can do beforehand, right? And I'll talk about what those are to prepare, to have the right frame of mind for the students. So those are two of those are like that. Two of the strategies are things you can do in the moment, right? When you are in the situation where kids are dealing with failures, there are two things that you can do at that time. And the fifth one is things that you can do afterwards. Okay, so let's get started. The first one is starting with the end in mind. What does that mean? Now, when children understand the so what, so they're learning something, and if they understand what's the significance of that learning topic, they're more inclined to be a participant in that process, and a participant in a way that that allows them to even move past some of the hurdles that they might face. So it's very important to showcase to children what is it that where can they see the learning being applied. And so it's a great point to create connections with different careers out there, different creations, products out there, right? So for example, if your focus of the study is let's say forces and motion, if you're involved in that kind of a study, there are many careers that actually would touch that field of study. So for example, mechanical engineering, aerospace engineering, even biomed engineering. So you could take one of those topics. It's a great idea to look actually into your community and also see if there are certain big employers that represent certain industries, and then you can actually incorporate that into your career connection, because it just makes it a lot more community, like a local. You're involving the community, and it becomes a very nice, creates that ecosystem of learning for you and your students, right? So you can do that, is bring that connection, career connection for the students, so showcasing those careers, and then also talking about, not only what the career entails, what would a person do in that field of study, also how much money they can make, because you never know, sometimes the motivators are about, what you can do, or sometimes it's about how much you can make, or what kind of products you can create. So also, when you make those connections, talk about what are some of the creations of these, of the people who work in these fields. So for example, if you talk about computer sciences, you can talk about, of course, the different computer games or the applications out there that the computer programmer might be making. So bringing some of those, so children can really connect, and it becomes more tangible, right? It doesn't stay like a fluff, it becomes more tangible, and that's something really important. Now I remember growing up, for me, one of my biggest thing was, I just wanted to learn and basically get into employment. I wanted to earn so that I could have the resources which growing up I felt like I did not have. And so that was one of my motivators out there, and again, it could be something different for other people as well. Showcasing role models is also very powerful, because it starts to create this, of course, children able to see are able to see real people who have gone into those careers. It starts to create that curiosity, right? Oh, this person looks like me. So let me see, how did they reach to that career or that position. Or this person seems like came from similar social setting as me. Let me see. Let me understand what were their journey as they came into this field of study. So those connections are really important. Again, for me, back then when I was in I would say middle school or so, we did not have. I grew up in India, and we did not have too many female role models out there, female who would be working. And I remember in our neighborhood there was like one household where the mom was working too. So there were two earners in the family, and you could clearly see the kind of resources the family had, right? So that lady was my role model. I was like, I have to start working and have to earn. So it's great to have those role models and showcase to the children. Let's move on to the second part, which is actually really, really important once you've done this kind of showing the end, right? What's the end result of whatever learning that you're doing? And remember, you're doing this thing way in advance, right? So if let's say you're beginning a STEM rotation, or you're beginning a new topic in the beginning of the year, or maybe it's the beginning of a quarter, that's when you want to create those connections. And of course, you keep adding to that throughout the course, but at least creating that picture of the end is very important before you begin the actual course content itself. Okay. Now, the next piece is, again, it happens up front, is setting up expectations. Now, every time I see a new class getting started, right, we always talk about good behaviors, bad behaviors, and the rewards and the consequences, and so on and so forth, right? Right along in the same pattern, it's very important to set some expectations around what could happen when you are working on STEM, and how you may feel about certain things. So there are two sets of things I want to talk about here. Number one is the creation process that's involved in STEM, right? So we're always, the beauty of STEM teaching is that you're trying to take the kids up on the Bloom's taxonomy, right? So Bloom's taxonomy, right? The hierarchy that talks about going deeper into the thought process as you're teaching a topic. So at the bottom of the pyramid, it's like a pyramid. And the bottom, you have the simpler understanding, just simple things like, just repeating facts and understanding the concept. And the higher up you go, you're going into more and more deeper, advanced level of thinking, which gets into analysis, evaluation, comparison, creation at the very top. And that's the beauty of STEM, right? We're encouraging kids to go higher up in this hierarchical thinking, right? You're going taking them higher up. And creation, we all know that process of creation is error prone, and there are obstacles and roadblocks that come along the way. So now that we are doing STEM with kids, we are putting them more and more into this creation process. Of course, there are going to be a lot more of those hurdles and failures that they're going to experience. And along with that, those failures and hurdles comes the dips, right? That feeling low energy and all the other things we just talked about as we began. So letting kids know that feeling that sense of low energy, or the feeling, that you're feeling frustrated, all that is normal. And I want you to think about what happens that when we as adults, when we face some of these obstacles, we tend to go into what's called a BCD reaction. BCD reaction. So what that is that it's an immediate emotional reaction, right? We get frustrated, angry, sad, and the BCD is blaming others, complaining about the tools or the environment that we are in, and D is defending ourselves. And that's us, right? We are the older, mature people. Now think about little kids, the youngsters who are trying to do these STEM projects, right? So of course they do not, many times they don't have the knowledge or the experience to figure out how to deal with all these emotional experiences that they have when they get into these into the situation of facing a hurdle. So that's why number one, set expectation that when you are doing these engineering design projects, these are challenges, and you may find them to be challenging, and you may feel like you're facing a hurdle. You may feel all these other emotions, and all of that is normal. Okay, so that's number one. It's all normal. Now, the second thing I want to talk about in the context of setting expectation is that many a times we're also dealing with other unique challenges. Now, there could be some unique challenges that we face due to our gender, our color, race, or ethnicities. My unique challenge growing up was being a girl in STEM, and specifically in India, where I was growing up. A girl in engineering during those days was not a normal thing, right? And there were numerous naysayers along the way. There was a constant chatter of, you're a girl, you can't be in engineering, or you can't do this, or you can't do that. I still remember a professor from my first year of college. He never missed his chance to remind me that engineering was not the right place for a girl. I came out crying from almost every one of his classes. What pulled me through? I remember from early childhood, my parents used to tell me, Moni, you are a girl. People around us, many even our own relatives, may say that you cannot do this because you're a girl. Just know that irrespective of what people say, you are capable and you can do what you set your eyes to do. That was empowering. I grew up hearing those words from my parents in many different forms. So when I hear this professor talk about whatever he was saying, it was not a surprise or shock for me, even though I did have this reaction, right? I would cry. But deep down, I knew, okay, I knew this was going to happen. And I had in me to go figure out, find what to do next with it. And what I did was simple. Well, it's not simple, but I channeled that negative energy And I used to call these people, I mean, there were many of these people in my life, and I call them anti mentors. They're a form of mentors, by the way. And I use them in a very positive way, by the way. And I use that energy to strengthen my resolve to persist and to show to the world that I belonged. And that's what we want to encourage our students to do as well, is for them to believe that they can do what they want to do, right? Irrespective of what the world around them tells them. So setting expectations is important. Now we move on to, so those are the two things that you do upfront, right? Now we haven't even begun doing any kind of challenges. We haven't even started doing any engineering design project, but you've done those two steps already. And you reiterate that, as and when needed, right? Because, repetition is important for students. Let's move on to the next strategy then. So you've done those two things. Now let's say you are in the moment, right? You're doing an engineering project and it's a group of children or just students failing in certain things that they're trying to do, right, in the design. So we have a mindset of celebrating failures. And why do we do that? Because we consider failures to be learning opportunities. These are opportunities, right? And so, what we want to do is look at those failures with a view to learn, okay, what is it that does not work? And when a child or a group of children get into that failure, basically saying, hey guys, come on, it's a happy moment, right? Hey, you just found a way that this does not work. Now let's look at it together, and you make it almost like a class. You bring attention to it as a class and say, give kudos to the group for finding a way that this does not work. And then you analyze together, what is it in this design that is not allowing it to function the way we want it to function. So for example, I remember we were doing very simple EDP, engineering design project, just designing like spin tops. And all you do is cut a cardboard, circular cardboards, and you poke a pencil through it, right? And very simple spin tops. And we would find some designs are like wobbly. And then we'd say the same thing. Okay, let's look at it closer, yeah, right? And see what's really happening with it. And so now the students start thinking critically about, okay, why is it wobbling? And then somebody some student will bring up the point saying, hey, why does the hole does looks like it's a little bit to the side? Could that be creating a problem? And then you make a hypothesis, that is that the position of the hole that's creating the problem. And then you based on that hypothesis, some other group of children will bring their model and say, okay, ours is our hole is towards the center, and they'll say, yeah, this is spinning fine, whereas this other one is wobbly. So maybe it's the position of the hole. If it's not in the center, the forces are not balanced, and that's creating that wobble effect. Sometimes the cardboard's just not cut evenly, so instead of a circle, you have a little contorted shape, and that would create problems as well. So you basically start to have children think about and reflect on what are the different situations, what is it that's causing the situation. And by creating this opportunity, you are also bringing in 4 C's, right? So the 4 C skills of communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. In what way, you may ask, right? So number one, communication. Of course, now you are actually encouraging the team, the group, to start thinking about and figuring out, like, what is it about this situation that is the design that's not allowing it to function, right? There's collaboration involved, because not just that team, but the other teams are also now giving their inputs. We've had situations where maybe a group kind of made their design without any hurdles, and we grouped them with this other team which may be struggling a little bit, and let them, work out a solution together. Because at the end of the day, if you think about it, most learning comes when there are failures involved, right? If you had everything smooth sailing and you just made the design by itself, you didn't learn about, what is it that doesn't work. So the next time you're trying to build it, and let's say you encounter those problems, now you have absolutely no understanding, right? So bringing it all together. And of course, there's a lot of critical thinking involved now, right? Because you are trying to figure out what is it about this design that's just not working. Um, and creativity, of course. So it's a great way to bring it all together as you celebrate. And I literally mean celebrating, right? Celebrating. There's a clap, and okay, we just found a way that this does not work, and make it like that, because that also creates a sense of accomplishment, right? So what you're doing is you detached the sense of accomplishment from the end result, that okay, we create a design that worked completely well. You detach it from there, and you attach the sense of accomplishment to the process itself, that in this process of getting to that design, we have found one way, two way, three way, four ways that it does not work. And those are all milestones. Those are all, milestones in that journey. So you see how you build that sense of accomplishment as well. Shelby Jones, a director of creative content, and she's showcasing how to celebrate failures while you're in um, as part of your engineering design project. So she'll show you that with a little example. So let me pull that up here quickly.
I want to mention that making paper airplanes may seem simple, but with any engineering and design project, we always have something called dealing with the dips, right? Um, this is something that, the kids are building their own airplanes, they're building their own project, their own solution, and not everything is going to work the first way around, right? Um, we know that when we're talking about engineering and talking about the sciences themselves, a lot of the times what will happen is that as scientists or engineers are building something, they're going to come up with a lot more solutions that won't work rather than the actual solution that they end up with. And that's why this is engineering and design process is so important, because we start with one solution that we're coming up with, and then we get to that improved stage and we make it better, right? And we have to ask ourselves, did it work or didn't it work, right? So that means that with the kids, you want to emphasize that not every solution that's going to happen that they come up with is going to work. And that is perfectly fine, because in that case, we came up with a solution that we know is not going to work. One thing I like to talk about is, and I know most kids know about this YouTuber called Mark Rober. He's an engineering YouTuber. He builds a lot of different builds. He has like classes that he does for students, and he also just does a lot of builds from like the glitter bomb, which I'm sure you guys have seen videos of, all the way to a squirrel obstacle course. But he actually worked at NASA, and he worked on Mars Curiosity rover. How was that, like a decade ago, really, at this point. And one thing that he noted was that, he went back to NASA just to kind of see about Perseverance, which is the rover that just got to Mars in February of 2021. And he was talking to NASA, his old team, and talking about the way that they built Perseverance and everything. And he actually was in a room and he noticed that on the wall they were displaying a bunch of different things that they had made, a bunch of different projects that they had made for these rovers. And he noticed there was one project on there that was a project that they had built that actually didn't work. It was something that they built in a team. They made, it was supposed to be for the Curiosity rover, but it turned out that it didn't work. It didn't actually complete the goal that they had in mind. But NASA actually still kept it on the wall of projects and things that they had built alongside with the ones that did work. And that was very interesting to me, because it made me realize that with that project, they were showing that, hey, here's one way that this problem that we have, it will not work with this sort of solution. And that's really powerful to know that NASA was keeping up this solution that didn't actually work for the problem that they were trying to solve. And it's important for the kids to understand that If they come up with a solution that doesn't work, that's perfectly fine, right? It happens. And when we do have a solution that doesn't work, that means we found a way that we can tell others that, hey, I made it this way. It didn't quite work the way I wanted it to. And I want you to know so that you don't make the same thing that I made, right? So they know, like, okay, if I'm going to this step of the problem, I know that this won't work, so let me try something else, right? And they can, of course, the students can take it with them along the way too. A couple of the ways that things can happen with at least this project, right, is not having, not folding correctly or not folding completely, right? This one's a little bit more bubbled than this version is. And these are things that the kids will learn along the way. So if they're in like a team, but they're building their own paper airplanes, they can say, oh, I didn't push down this crease hard enough. So maybe you can try to push down your creases a little bit harder too, because I just tested it and it didn't quite work. It didn't go very far. It kind of opened up while I was throwing it. So I think that might be a good idea for you to also do, right? They could take their experiences and be able to help each other and learn from those failures, if you will, but they're not failures, right? They are a solution that just didn't work as intended, and that's perfectly fine because we learn from those errors that happen, and errors happen in everything.
All right, so I hope that was helpful in showing it as part of a real, like an example of an engineering design project. So, continuing down the path where we were, going on to step number 4. I think we were on step number 4. Um, so the step number 4 is actually something that may happen even before your number 3, but calm the storm. What do I mean by that? When you are emotionally charged, right, and you're feeling all these emotions of anger, frustration, just whatever it is, all those negative emotions, and when those are flowing really strongly, it's hard to actually sit down and focus and find a creative solution. So, oftentimes, what you need to do first is to calm that storm, right? And then come back to whatever you are doing. So, depending on how your cluster is set up, how much time you have, taking a little break. If you're seeing that there's too much emotional charge going on, simple break, water break, bathroom breaks. We just call it a brain break, right? Give brain like some moment to just take a pause. Another thing that really works very well, depending on the age of the students you're working with, any kind of physical activity is a great way. I mean, a physical activity really takes you away from that brain, and refocuses you once you kind of you can bring when you come back to it. So with little kids, you can do some kind of a jumping around, just getting them off on their foot and doing some little activity. Um, um, some kind of a rhyme, enacting, role play, any of those things will work. With older kids, you can definitely, try some different activities where maybe if they were making an engineering design, like the one you saw with making the paper planes, if there are some working ones, having them kind of just launch it and play with it a little bit. So you can do some different activities. Also breathing, I think something that we've heard a lot about, just deep breathing like that is a really powerful way to just calm everything down. So you can encourage kids to use some of those strategies. And of course, it also works on you, right? To just kind of take that moment to calm down. And then you can come back and, go to number 3 or whichever, it's something that may be iterative, right? You might be on number 3, you may have to go to 4 and come back to 3, things like that. Because EDP, it's a iterative process, right? Kids are making they might face different kinds of hurdles, and then they're again improvising, trying to fix the problem, and so on and so forth. So just make sure you kind of go back and forth as needed, um, just to get everything back in the rhythm. Okay, so that's the number 4, calming the storm. And then I mentioned to you number 5, which actually goes into the post, right? You have done the activity, now what can you do afterwards? And there are couple of things that we like to do, and I'm going to give you 3 examples here. So post project, so you've done that and you've gone through all the the dealing with the failures and everything else. Doing peer reviews is a great one because remember, we're trying to integrate social emotional learning, right? And so, of course, as educators, we see certain things about the students, right? What good things that they're doing or not doing. But actually, their peers, the other students see things that we may sometimes miss. And using that peer review is a very powerful process. But one caveat that we always used, and you can try that as well, and has been very helpful, is keeping it all positive. Because you know how easy is it to find all the negatives that we notice with a person, but we are going to challenge the students to only focus on the positives. So let's say, hey, let's talk about Tony. What were the good things that Tony did today, right? And so, as if a child, if let's say another student starts talking about Tony and they go take on a negative pathway, oh, they were not so good with this, we just stop them right then and there and say, okay, listen, right now we are focusing on only the good things. So tell us what positive, good things did you notice about Tony? You stop them right there. And then, and if somebody has nothing positive to say, they don't have to say, right? So you're going to only focus on the positives. And it's really interesting because we would get feedback like, oh, um, you are so helpful. My pencil fell down and you picked it up for me, or you helped me cut this cardboard. And the children are able to give that feedback to each other, which actually is a confidence booster for the person who's receiving that feedback. And of course, it's further reinforcing the communication skills, right? Children are thinking now about what were some of the behaviors they witnessed which were positive. So there's a lot of these 4C elements also getting involved, and it brings that positive energy within the classroom as kids are working together, and they're really trying to boost the positive, right? Everybody has weaknesses, we all know, and oftentimes those weaknesses get a lot of focus. But for this particular activity, we just want to boost the positives, okay? Just give them more of that boost. So that's number one. Number two is metacognition. That this is a self-assessment, right? So you just we have some worksheets on this, but basically just have the child reflect and take some notes depending on how old they are. Younger kids can probably just draw emojis and things like that, but older kids can actually write it out, or you can actually have them talk about it. Things like, what was your experience working on this project? What were some things that you thought you knew? Um, what other things you needed to know? How did you feel through this experience? And so things like that. Just metacognition means thinking about thinking, right? So it's really having them reflect about their own thinking. Now, why we focus so much on the thought process itself is because in today's world, right, any content knowledge is available to students, right? You can Google or YouTube anything, right? You want to learn something, it's all right in front of you. Um, so it's very important is that we help children understand their own thought process on how they process information, how do they deal with their own thinking, and how do they apply that thought process in whatever creation they're doing. And so that's why that process becomes a lot more important. We need to keep them in balance, but the content is available, right? Content knowledge is available everywhere these days. It's more about how the child is processing that, and we want to help them through that. So that's why metacognition actually really helps with that part of the child's learning journey. And the third element is parental communication, right? I know when we would have some very challenging projects like this, we would make sure to communicate with the parents and we'll let them know, hey, today kids were working on this really challenging activity. They were trying to learn about how the spinning motion works, and to understand that they were making spin tops. And during that process, they really stretched their mental muscles today. And in that learning process, they learned about how not having a hole in the center creates wobbly spin tops and so on and so forth, right? So you kind of bring parents as part of the process and give them a little bit more insights into the kind of um, learning, right? We want to take the positive spin on things, right? Not the struggle, but so much more about, from that struggle, what learning came out, right? So you're kind of bringing parents as part of that process so that when the child gets back home, they can talk a little more about all those learnings, because remember, those learnings are the nuggets, right, that the child is going to retain, because they got that learning after so much struggle. That is going to be a lot more sticky experience for them, as long as we kept it all positive, right? So at the end of the day, if you follow those 5 steps, right, what happens is, going into the project, the child understands the end, right? Oh, they're trying to work, they're trying to learn these concepts, because when you learn these concepts, you may you may become a mechanical engineer, and you can do all these great things, and I'm just so excited to be working and building things like that. um, or I want to be like person so and so. You have already set expectation that failures are going to happen. When they happen, it's normal. Or you may have your own set of challenges because of the way you look. And once you are in that moment, then you celebrate those failures, you calm the storm as needed, and then do these post project peers and reviews. I want to share some additional, I mentioned to you about calming the storm, and even while you're setting expectations up front, there's some little video snippets I want to share with you that it really helps. Like, they're inspirational, and they help kids think about, that, again, all these hurdles, obstacles, they're part of the process. Okay. So Shelby, in her little clip, talked about the NASA projects, right? Of course, we have many. I mean, most of these projects have had failures, but it's all just normal. It's part of the process. So about
15 famous failures before success. Number 1. She was fired from her news anchor job because she wasn't fit for television. Oprah Winfrey, multi-billionaire media mogul and one of the most influential women in the world. Number 2. He was cut off of his high school basketball team because he simply didn't have it. Michael Jordan, basketball's greatest of all time. Here's what he said about failure. I have missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. On 26 occasions, I've been entrusted to take the game-winning shot and I missed. I have failed over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed.
Right, so you get an idea. I mean, there are multiple stories like that, and these are just so inspirational. And depending on where your students' interest lies, you can actually pick and choose some of the celebrities, and you can talk about some of these stories that may help encourage them think about failures and all these other things in a different light. So, moving on, so we have talked about um, the 5 ways to incorporate social emotional learning with career connections into your into teaching STEM, starting with the end in mind, setting expectations, celebrating failures, calming the storm, and the post project review and communications.